Why would any American want to destroy an American community and kill people and enslave them with debt?
So if I want to change the economy and I want to change it from a democratic republic to essentially an oligarchy, then what I need to do is I need to consolidate wealth, and I need to reduce the general population to a group of people who are much easier to control. So let me go back. In 1995, there was an effort made by the people who I would describe as leading the financial system to try and put the country on a financially sound basis. And it failed and ended up at the end of 1995 in a 3-week shutdown of the government. I don't know if you remember that.
Yes,
it was during the Clinton administration.
Well.
And it was described to me by the president of the largest pension fund in the country several years later. He said, "You don't understand. They've given up. They've given up on the country, and they're moving all the money out starting in the fall." And that was when the $21 trillion started to go missing, compounded by the $29 trillion that went out on the bailouts. I think what happened was when they failed to achieve a real fiscally responsible approach to the federal balance sheet, that they decided to do two things. One, they decided to do a financial coup in a process where instead of the bankers just running monetary policy, they could then run fiscal policy. And I think the second thing they decided to do is, if you can't balance the budget with financial responsibility, you can balance the budget by lowering life expectancy. So if you can't fund the pension and retirement system with enough money to meet your obligations, you can meet your obligations by lowering life expectancy. And I think a conscious decision was made to do that. That literally right after the budget deal sort of busted, two decisions were made. One was to approve OxyContin and open the pill mills. The second was all sorts of policies that permitted HUD and other mortgage predatory lending. And that happened right as they also made the decision to do the private prisons, and they kept flooding the neighborhoods with drugs. And if you look at the combination of the pill mills, the predatory lending, narcotics trafficking coming in, again, this is all covered in my online book. It dramatically started to steadily reduce life expectancy, particularly in the lower income groups. And I knew it was coming. One of the reasons I kept talking with everybody about the missing money is I knew that it would hit the middle income groups. It was just a matter of time. And I remember, I always tell the story of talking to Dr. Mark Skidmore, who had worked with me on the missing money. I was sitting in a car in Bolivar, Tennessee. I was doing errands. And he kept saying to me, "Why do you keep bringing up all the money that's going missing from the federal government? Why don't you give up on this?" And I said, "Don't you understand, Mark? If we don't do something about this, they're going to take radical steps of lowering life expectancy." And that was in 2018. And of course, COVID hit in 2020. And what did we get? We got a whole series of actions that continued to lower life expectancy, but this time in the middle and upper middle class groups.
It's so obvious to me that reducing population, either through shortening their lives or preventing them from being born in the first place, that's official U.S. policy, of course.
Right.
Abortion, euthanasia, drugs. But I've always sort of wondered why. And do you think it's because that's the only way to get the country solvent?
So I think it's a combination of things. First of all, you have, again, we have this explosive new technology, and I think you have a lot of people in the leadership who believe, first of all, it's very difficult to manage people, particularly if they get their hands on this technology, but they also believe they're going to live for a long, long time. Jared Kushner, when he left the first Trump administration, did a podcast and said, "I'm the first generation to live forever, the last generation to, not live forever." Sean Parker, one of the co-founders of Facebook, said, I'm a billionaire, so I'm going to live to 145. If the oligarchs are going to live to 145, one of the things they know is not everybody can do that, or you're going to have an environmental problem, right? Right. So part of it is that. But I also think with robotics and automation, they think they don't need a lot of people, and a lot of people are hard to manage.
Yes.
Now, if you look at what they're doing to build a control grid, clearly they think if they can accomplish that, it's going to make it much easier to manage a lot of people. But frankly, they don't necessarily want them around. They don't need them. And so I do believe that many of them feel they would be much better off with much lower populations.
I think that's obviously true. May I ask, though, about what role a global war would play in that? So, like, on the one hand, obviously war reduces population. And if you wanted to clear the Ukrainians out of Ukraine, leaving only the resources and Indian immigrants, you would do what they are doing. I get it. But once you start pushing up against the possibility of a nuclear exchange, a total war, a global war, then don't you, and which they are doing knowingly, and I don't know if it's reckless or intentional or what exactly it is, but they know that we're moving toward global war, and they're not slowing down. The Trump administration and all the people who support it.
Right.
Don't you kind of risk your own plans by doing that? That seems very much like a dice roll.
So there are a couple theories. I think there's some people who, do want to bring on Armageddon. That's a cultural and religious cross section of some of the people involved. But the other thing is, if you've been responsible for the dollar system, and you know how dangerous an improper or a difficult unraveling of the dollar system could be for most of the countries around the world, you know how an unraveling could kill and hurt and maim, then you will go to extreme lengths and kill many, many people to avoid that. And part of it is, if you're used to having power, you do not want to convert to a meritocracy. I mean, the way to solve, I just told you the thing you just did on how to save America, I think is one of the best things you've ever done. And if, in theory, we all woke up tomorrow and followed your 10 principles of, in our own lives, in our own family, in our own community, we could see an unbelievably explosive wealth creation. I mean, one of the things I want to stress is tyranny is very, very wasteful. And the potential for wealth explosion, if we could somehow, behave like we were an advanced civilization, is an extraordinary opportunity. But it's going to result in a meritocracy. And if you look at the people running things, they have no interest in competing in a meritocracy.
Yes.
Because they're going to lose, right?
Yeah.
And the nature of their situation is, when people in their situation lose, they get killed and their families get killed. So they are at the point where they would do control. I remember one group telling me about a group during the 80s when the Iran-Contra was really getting out of hand, talking about they had started to make plans about dropping exploding a suitcase nuke in the middle of Chicago, just to distract. Remember, one of the goals of war is to control the domestic population. And we are now approaching a time where whether you have a war or you get the control grid, controlling the domestic population is going to be very difficult.
So won't that control grid make it easier?
Yeah, if they can get it. Yeah. If they can put it into place.